it started out like he said, I had a $500 rifle or a $800 rifle that I had that I was utilizing, and I kind of got to a point where I was like, I want to take that next step. What does that look like? And so I sold that rifle because I decided that if I wasn't good enough for me to keep, then it wasn't good enough for me to give to one of my kids at the time. And so I went ahead and sold it, and that helped pay for my upgrade. I had money set aside that I could use. I sold that. That gave me another portion, so I was able to upgrade to like that $1,200 to $1,500 rifle. And that was kind of that next step. But that's not necessary eh, for you to get out there and hunt. And again, we talk about weight, pain, or ounces equals pounds. You can get some of these inexpensive rifles that are great shooting rifles that are still pretty lightweight, like the Tika T3 Light. They
Mhm.
are, I think the light versions, the T3X Light starts at 900, right? And there's some other rifles in that kind of that same 6.5, 7.5 pound range. Christensen at Shot Show this year released their new Evoke that is going to be, it's like in that $700 range. Um, and so you don't have to go out there and buy a $1,500 rifle to be a hunter.
Right.
And then your cartridges that you're big, obviously, like Mike said, he's got the experience on the longer range stuff. You get a gun that shoots a 3-inch group at 100 yards, you're probably not shooting 1,000 yards. But if you want to shoot those farther distances, then the other thing besides rifle is your ammo factor. And so you just look into ammo that's going to be like what's a 7 PRC, 300 PRC are going to be more accurate. The 6.5 Creedmoor, the a 280 Ackley, those are going to be more accurate than a 30-06 and a 30-30. So if you want to push those longer distances, then you just kind of do some research, figure out what cartridge is going to meet that needs of the distance you want to go, and then you can kind of make that decision from there. And it's good to know and think about ammo availability in your area too. Check out the local gun stores, see what ammo is regularly there. Are you picking up around? Like we were actually just talking, Mike and I really was thinking about trying to pick up a 6.8 Western, but there's no 6.8 Western in interior Alaska. I checked,
Right.
I think, 5 or 6 different stores, and I couldn't find a single box. And I was like, Mike was like, it's a round that is really cool. It's got some really great stuff about it, but unless you're hand loading yourself, you're going to have a hard time shooting it. And that's true. There was nowhere here that I was going to be able to find ammo for that. So I kind of scratched that one off the list. So just some things to think about.
And then with glass, go with something that's going to hold zero. That's the biggest thing. You can go buy a $70 scope and leave it in the box all year, take it out, fire one round through it, and it's off zero now. So buy something that's going to hold zero. And if you buy a cheaper scope and you are shooting a little bit longer range, 2, 3, 400 yards, I don't recommend using the dials on your turrets because they're not meant machined to tight tolerances. Use your reticle. So take all that stuff into account. I'm a big fan of the Loophole Mark 5 HD for a hunting scope because weight wise, it's probably the lightest you can get with still having the capabilities that I want. And what I want might be different than what Tyrell wants and what somebody else wants. But don't go buy a freaking Night Force. You know, price point's not all that much different on this thing, but this thing's half the weight of a Night Force. So do your research for what you're going to be doing. Make sure that it's going to be able to take, high altitude, or it's going to be able to take rain and being wet and shock and, all
Yeah,
that stuff. And that goes with your rings and your mounts as well. And then
absolutely.
one thing you touched on earlier was rangefinder, binos, spotting scope.
Yeah,
These days, there is no need to have all three. Um, a lot of people, they know if an animal is close enough for them to identify something that they don't need a rangefinder. If you're not a long range hunter or a long range shooter, you probably don't need a rangefinder. You know that if it's inside 200 yards, it's inside 200 yards. That is what it is.
right.
If you're going to be shooting 3, 4, 500 yards, uh, you're going to want a rangefinder. There's ways to use your reticle. There's ways to do all that stuff, but that's further advanced into your shooting experience and learning and training. Uh, I carry I don't use a spotting scope anymore because I have a pair of binos that works really well and I have a really good scope. So it saves me pounds. I have a pair of range finding binos. I have the Sig Kilo 10Ks and they are excellent glass. They also have a rangefinder built into them. And if I can't see it with a 10x or 10x or an 8x zoom, I'm not going to see it with a 60. So you need to be able to see full curl. You need to be able to see 50 inches. You need to be able to see all sorts of stuff. There's more of
Right.
a use case for you to use that than there is for me. If I was in Alaska, I'd have a spotting scope everywhere I went, and my spotting scope would have a reticle in it. So that you take your rangefinder and you say, okay, animal's 400 yards away. Let's say it's 700 yards away. You're not going to shoot at that animal, Tyro.
No.
But you can say, okay, it's 700 yards away. I know that one MOA is 1 inch at 100 yards, and that rack is X minute of angle, X MOA wide, at X range, and I can do a math problem and figure out if he's even worth chasing legally.
Right.
So take all that into consideration. If you're down here in the lower 48, I don't see the need for a spotting scope. If you're out in, the desert, look for dust. That's where the elk are because they freaking create all sorts of dust.
Yeah.
If you're in antelope country, they're all out in the flats. If you're in deer country, you're going to be in the freaking trees and in the woods, and you don't have a shot further than 100 yards. So
Right.
know what you're chasing and know where you're chasing it, and build your kit to fit.
I definitely think for new hunters, a rangefinder, especially like if you do certain activities, like if you're somebody who maybe like is a golfer historically, or you've spent a lot of time on a golf course where you're gauging distance, then rangefinders may not be super beneficial. But I think for the average hunter, rangefinders are a huge benefit because they don't know what that distance actually looks like. And it's hard to judge if you're not used to it. Like, honestly, I'm a terrible judge of distance. Even after all this time, I should be a much better judge after the 10, 12 years I've been up here. But I'm a terrible judge of distance. And so I have a hard time with that. So I like having a rangefinder. But for me, I switched to a rangefinder bino, so I get all that in one package. It's a little bit
Mhm.
heavier on the bino side, but then I'm not having as much gear on my chest getting in the way, moving around while I'm trying to do stuff. So
Right.
generally in my chest rig, I'm going to carry my binos. I used to carry a rangefinder. Luckily, I've been able to combine those, and then I carry a oh my gosh, a little smoke puffer. I just forgot what
Mhm.
they're called, but a windicator. I carry a
Yep.
little windicator, and if I'm thinking I'm going to be shooting longer distance, that's also where I'll put a wind gauge or a little mini weather station to get wind reading and stuff. But for the average guy who you're just starting out, I would definitely say like I think it used to be that 10 by 42s were kind of the ideal binocular because any stronger power than 10, it magnifies your vibrations of your own body shaking and your heartbeat and stuff. So it gets a little bit harder to spot. 8 is nice because you get a bigger field of view, but then you lose the 2 power magnification. So it used to be, and I don't know if this is still the case, but 10 by 42s were kind of the sweet spot. So if
Mhm.
you're just getting into this, I would say look at like 8 by 32s or 10 by 42s. Look at getting a rangefinder so you can see those distances no matter where you're at, unless you're shooting, like if you're a tree stand hunter somewhere and you're just sitting with known marks, then you don't really need a rangefinder. But if you're hunting any open country or moving, get a rangefinder, even if it's a cheap one, and just so you can help gauge yourself. Like on my moose hunt this year, first thing I did when I climbed into the spot where I was shooting, I just started arranging all these different spots around me so that I knew that if a moose was outside of these areas, that I wasn't even going to look at him. He had to come inside of these before I was getting serious. So as soon as I saw my bull, I started calling, and then he was working his way towards me and crossed one of those barriers. And I was like, all right, now he's inside 300 yards. Now I need to start really being serious about where and how I'm going to shoot him. I do agree with you. I think that the average person does not need a spotting scope. Even here in Alaska, I don't think the average guy needs a spotting scope. I don't think you need a spotting scope for moose, even in a 50-inch area, because there's tricks and stuff, and you're going to have to get closer than you're going to need to get close enough that you'll be able to do it with your binos or even your rifle scope if you really had to. Um,
Yeah, I would use the reticle on my rifle scope to measure, you know.
Measure, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing, because you're looking for on a moose, you're looking for that droop off the head. is a good tell that they're bigger. And then brow tines is the other one you're looking for. And then you need a good measurement on the width of the eyes. There's a bunch of different tricks I've heard measuring the ears. The ears are 9 inches. I've heard the eyes are 9 or the eyes are 10. Really, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You got to figure that out for yourself, kind of. Don't
People
take
that
my
kill
word for that.
51-inch moose, I question their morality sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I passed on a bull. I've actually posted a couple little shorts about him recently. I passed on a bull. We called him into 30 yards. We called him in from over a quarter of a mile to 30 yards. And I just kept taking pictures of him through my digiscope as he got closer and closer and closer. And we actually pulled out, my buddy had a tape measure on his quad. We pulled out a tape measure and we were literally measuring it, going, okay, eye to eye is a quarter of an inch. So now outside edge to outside edge. And he was like, we figured he was like 48 or 52, and we let him walk because I was
Yeah,
like, I just can't. I'm not willing to risk that. It's not worth.
you're
It's not
right.
worth losing my hunting for a couple of years and the fine and losing the animal, the meat that I'm mostly a meat hunter. I love the trophy. I love being able to have an animal on the wall, but I'm a meat hunter. I've got 5 kids, and my wife. We got 2 dogs. I need to bring home meat so that my bills go down a little bit. Especially I got almost 3 teenage boys, and so like that's important to me to bring home that meat, and it's not worth the risk over those 2 inches. So we let him walk. Um, yeah, I think guys who are shooting 50-inch bulls in a 50 or greater area, I'm like, man, you either are way more confident than I am for some reason, or you just don't need you aren't worried about your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between shooting the wrong duck and,
Right.
it not coming out with you. You can't shoot, shovel, and shut up on a freaking moose.
Nothing to say to that. I got nothing to say to that. All right.
So, one thing I wanted to touch on real quick for
Yeah.
those of you who maybe don't have a rangefinder or you're not good at judging distance, I use a halving method every time I'm out without a rangefinder, and this is something that he's just in the sniper world. So why am I going to estimate the range to my target? Now, if I have a reticle that'll do it for me, if I know that the average human at 5'10" is this many MOA or mils at 100 yards, and then I say, okay, he's only 1.2 mils, I can do a cross multiply and divide problem and figure out how far away he is, dope it, send it. But use a halving method. If there's an animal out there and you're like, I have no idea how far that is, pick the spot that's halfway between you and the animal and try to figure out how far that is and just double it. Because
Yeah.
we all can judge 10 feet. We can all judge 20 feet. 60, 80, 90 gets harder, but if you pick a spot in the middle, a lot easier. So
Yeah. That's true. Good point. Last thing for tonight, and then I'll let you go. I know this is for those who are sticking around for the long form here. We're running longer than Mike and I intended, but um, last thing to really touch on is shelters. So you kind of mentioned that you're running a TP now too. Do you run your TP with the floor in the bottom, or are you running it floorless?
depends on weather.
Gotcha.
I do
Okay.
I do my research before I go. If there's going to be potential rain or snow, I bring a bottom. Um, and if there's not, if it's going to be dry, no bottom.
Gotcha. So there are a variety of tents, a variety of shelter types. I mean, really, there's so many more than my sheep hunting buddy Eric has become even more of a gearhead than me in a lot of ways, and specifically on shelters and sleep systems. It is so funny, and it's a ton of fun going over this stuff with him. Um, you've got hammocks now. You've got full hammocks that are full tents that you can just hang. You've got tarps that are just glorified. It's a glorified sheet that you're supposed to sleep under. You've got teepees. You've got trekking pole tents. You've got freestanding tents. I feel like I'm missing something. You got big, thick, like the Hillebergs that are bomb proof and awesome and heavy, and then you've got like the mid level stuff that's kind of like, you got your big Agnes that's lighter weight and um, lighter weight, but still, I would say they're on the lighter side. And then you've got the stuff in the middle, Stone Glacier and Kuyu.
I run a peaks.
Right, you run the peaks, I run an Argali. Those are kind of on the TP side of things. But there's like, yeah, there's just this huge gamut of shelters. So what made you decide to go with a TP, or and kind of what was your progression through your different shelters, and do you have different options that you have kind of as backup just in case you don't want to take the TP, and kind of what's that look like?
So in a desert hunt in the summer, I take a bivouac.
Okay.
I get a two-person bivouac. All my gear goes on one side of me, I go on the other. I'm not worried about heat. Um,
Right.
but the reason I went for a cold weather tent, the reason I went with a teepee, like I said earlier, with the point, heat can only go so much before it maxes out and it starts coming back down. With a dome top, you have to put way more heat in that tent to keep it warmer down at your level. So I think it's really important to get off the ground. Ground conducts heat like nobody's business. Suck the heat right out of you. I'm a big fan of a space blanket. Some people like a sleeping pad. Like I said, embrace the suck. So I
Oh,
don't. I don't use a sleeping bag.
you just sleep on a space blanket?
Yeah, I just put a space blanket down,
Oh,
and because it won't allow the cold through it.
right.
So and it does a pretty good job of keeping the heat from going through it. So
Interesting.
yeah, I've always just been a space blanket guy. It's cheap. It's lightweight. It can be
Yeah.
used as a signaling device if you need to. Um, all sorts of
And
things.
in the sheep hunting community, a lot of guys, um, they say that when you get back from a hunt, you should strip out your entire kit and lay everything out. And if you have any item that was only used for one purpose, then you need to really think about what that purpose was and if it's worth having or not. That's interesting about the space blanket because you've got so many additional uses for that, as far as on the ground and emergency shelter. If you have like two of those, that's no weight, and you can have two of them in your day pack as you're out running around, one for the ground, one for over the top of you. That's very interesting. I've never thought of that. I've been a sleeping pad guy since I got into this side of things where I'm sleeping out in a tent. But that's very interesting. I'll have to try that because I like the idea of bringing a little bit less stuff,
Yeah.
especially
So
like I'm planning on a solo sheep hunt this year. Where I'll be out for 5 days. So even though it'll be less comfortable, the weight savings of just having a ground cloth in my teepee, because I'm taking the Argali teepee with me, and then I'll have a ground cloth to protect my sleeping bag and my sleeping pad. But then maybe just throwing a space blanket and not bringing the sleeping pad might be worth
yeah, and
an
if you have the
attempt.
time, build your bed. So, whether it's you don't have a lot of pine trees up there, so no pine boughs really, but moss, stuff like that. Throw it down between you and the ground, and then put your space blanket on top of it, because you can fluff that. You can, build it to however you need. If you got a big hole where you put your tent, but that was the only flat spot, fill it full of freaking moss, fill it full of dirt. Make your bed. When you're using a sleeping pad, it's not something you have to think about. But for me, when I go out, the first thing I do is I lay on it without a sleeping bag or anything, and I go, okay, this isn't going to work, and I'll go
There's a
get
rock
grass, or
there.
yeah, I'll go get grass or moss or juniper branches or whatever, and build my bed up, lay my space blanket down, sleeping bag on top.
Interesting. So when you're not, or do you have anything besides the Peaks TP, or is that really all you've got now?
I've got a canvas wall tent, so if I'm hunting, there's a certain unit that I draw about every 4 years where we can hunt from camp. So um, one thing to think about for viewers, if you're first getting into this, don't go find animals one year and then go camp there next year. Don't camp in the animals. People do that. It just irritates me. I'll go find a really good water hole like 3 miles from where the truck is, and I'll go set up camp a mile or two away from that, and I'll hike in to somebody's freaking camp at the water hole. It's like, well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So don't camp in the animals. But anyway, if I'm hunting certain units, I'll set up a wall tent for a week or 7 days and live like a king because my truck's parked right outside.
Right.
Or if I'm backpacking or backcountry hunting, I take the peaks, minimal gear, um, and go from there. But I always have a space blanket. I always have 550 cord, and I always have the ability to start a fire, even in wet conditions, on my person at all times. Because whatever you leave back at camp, if you break your leg, you're not going to get back to it.
Right.
So having a space blanket, being able to signal, being able to keep warm, the ability to start a fire, and then obviously, like you said, some sort of satellite uplink to call for help
Now, do you keep that fire starter on your person or in your day?
in my day bag. I keep the fire starter in my day bag, which if I take it off, it's sitting next to me. But if I move, that day bag goes with me. I never go without it.
As far as your shelter, there's so many different factors, and you're gonna kind of like we've talked about with everything else. You're gonna have to figure out what works best for you. For every individual, that's going to be different. For me, I love not having to crawl into my tent. My Stone Glacier, the one thing that made me angry, not every time I used it, but semi frequently, was having to get on my hands and knees and crawl into that tent. Just drove me nuts. And maybe if I was thinner, maybe if I was in better shape, maybe if I was more flexible, that wouldn't have been a problem. But for me, it was, and that was something that bothered me. You want a tent that's got good reputation. MSR Hubba Hubbas, the all the Hillebergs, the Peaks. There are so many tents out there now that have great reputations, but really do research and look at the area you're going or the animal you're going to be pursuing. You have to decide, kind of like Mike said earlier, what are you willing to pack, and how much weight are you willing to carry? What's worth it to you for your safety or for your um, not necessarily safety, but for your comfort. So you have to kind of weigh those. Is it worth your peace of mind to have that really heavy Hilleberg that is a bomb-proof tent that is going to like almost guarantee nothing goes wrong? Or are you wanting to risk it a little bit and maybe like if you're somewhere like my buddy, my sheep hunting buddy, his next trip, he as long as we're not up above tree line, he's planning on bringing a hammock. That's a tent hammock. So he's going to have the bottom of it. It folds out between two trees. It's got the little tent side of it, and then it's got a frame of sorts to kind of keep it spread out, so you get to actually lay flat, almost like a bed. A little bit more risk there. And then for me, for the teepee, I'm going floorless. What happens about rain coming up under the tent or high winds coming up under the tent? It's got less guy out points, and so there every tent and every brand is going to have a risk. So definitely look into that. See what the other thing is, your footprint. How much are you going into an area where you can fit a four-person tent? That's like one of the things when I tell everybody that the teepee I'm taking with me on my sheep hunt, they're like, that seems a little bit big. Are you going to be able to find somewhere to pitch it? I might just have to be a little bit more picky about where I pitch it. So there's a variety of things to think about.